The Velthari Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 37 conquered worlds, and their fleet of warships had never known defeat. When Fleet Commander Zorath ordered his 2,000 vessels to emerge from hyperspace near the small blue planet called Earth, he expected nothing more than another simple conquest. Zorath stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the planet spin slowly beneath him. It was a beautiful world, covered in blue oceans and green lands. His 4 eyes narrowed with satisfaction as he studied the primitive settlements scattered across its surface. "Begin the standard scan," he ordered his second-in-command, a younger officer named Veth. Veth worked the controls and frowned at the results. "Commander, the inhabitants appear to be a young species. They have only recently developed space travel. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "As expected," Zorath replied with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. "Send the standard ultimatum. Give them 72 of their planetary rotations to respond." The message was transmitted to every communication device on Earth. It was simple and direct. The same message the Velthari had sent to 37 worlds before this one. "Surrender all resources. Submit to genetic cataloging. Accept Dominion status. Or face complete extinction." Every world had surrendered. Every single one. On Earth, the message arrived at 3:47 in the morning at a military base in Colorado. Lieutenant Commander Danny Hayes was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when his screen lit up with the alien transmission. He stared at it for a long moment, his tired mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. "Get me General Morrison," he said quietly to the young private beside him. "Right now." Within 2 hours, every major government on Earth had received the news. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces were placed on high alert. Scientists scrambled to analyze the alien fleet that hung in orbit. Like a swarm of metal locusts, President Gregory Cole addressed the world from the White House 6 hours after the message arrived. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes, a former Marine who had served 3 tours in distant wars before entering politics. He looked into the camera and spoke with a steady voice. "My fellow citizens of Earth," he began, "we have received a message from beyond our world. An alien fleet has arrived in our solar system. They have demanded our surrender." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I will not pretend that this is not a serious situation. These beings possess technology far beyond our own. Their fleet is vast, and their intentions are hostile. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear." The president leaned forward slightly. "We will not surrender. We will not submit. We will not bow to threats from any power, no matter how advanced they may be. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. We are still here, and we will remain here." Around the world, people watched and listened. Some wept, some prayed, but many simply nodded and began to prepare. Admiral Lisa Brennan received her orders aboard the aircraft carrier USS Defiance. Stationed in the Pacific Ocean, she was a small woman with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much death to be afraid of anything. When she read the message from the president, she smiled grimly. "What should we tell them, Admiral?" her communications officer asked. Brennan thought for a moment. The Velthari were expecting fear. They were expecting panic and desperation. They were expecting humans to beg for mercy, just like every other species they had conquered. "One word," she said finally. "Just send them one word." "What word, ma'am?" No. The response puzzled the Velthari translators for hours. They ran it through every linguistic program they possessed, searching for hidden meanings or coded messages. Surely the humans understood their situation. Surely they realized that resistance was futile. The single word made no sense. Fleet. Commander Zorath received the translation with amusement. He had been conquering worlds for 200 years, and he had seen primitive species make foolish gestures of defiance before. They always surrendered in the end, usually after a brief demonstration of Veltari power. "They are stubborn," Veth observed. "Perhaps we should destroy one of their cities as a warning." Zorath shook his head. "Not yet. Let them have their 72 hours. Let them watch our fleet and understand what they face. Fear will do our work for us." But as the hours passed, Zorath began to notice something strange. The humans were not panicking. They were not fleeing their cities or fighting among themselves. Instead, they seemed to be working together with remarkable speed and efficiency. Factories around the world shifted to war production. Old enemies shared intelligence and resources. Scientists who had spent their careers competing now collaborated on desperate projects. The humans were preparing for war. "This is unusual," Beth said, studying the data streams from the planet below. "They are not behaving like other conquered species." "They will learn," Zorath replied confidently. "They all learn eventually." Dr. Nathan Greer had been working on plasma containment technology for 15 years. It was theoretical work, the kind of research that might produce results in a few decades if funding continued. Now he had 72 hours to turn theory into reality. He gathered his team in a secure laboratory beneath the Pentagon. 40 of the brightest minds on Earth looked at him with exhausted eyes and determined faces. "I will not lie to you," he said. "What we need to accomplish in 3 days should take 3 years. Maybe longer. But those aliens up there think we are primitive and weak. They think we will surrender like every other world they have conquered." He paused and looked at each of them in turn. "They are wrong. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity fights. And we are going to give our soldiers something to fight with." No one slept that night, or the next night, or the night after that. Around the world, similar scenes played out in laboratories, military bases, and government buildings. Humans who had spent their lives competing now united against a common enemy. Old hatreds were set aside. Old wounds were forgotten. For the first time in their long and bloody history, the people of Earth stood together as one. Fleet Commander Zorath watched the countdown timer on his display. 12 hours remained until the ultimatum expired. He had already selected the first target for destruction, a major coastal city called New York. "They will surrender after the demonstration," he told Veth with absolute certainty. "They always do." But deep in his 4 hearts, something whispered a warning. These humans were different. These humans were not afraid. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, Fleet Commander Zorath felt the cold touch of doubt. He pushed it aside. They were primitives. What could they possibly do against the might of the Veltari Dominion? He would soon find out. The 72 hours ended at midnight Earth time. Fleet Commander Zorath stood on his command deck and watched the final seconds tick away on his display. The humans had not surrendered. They had not even asked for more time to consider the offer. Their silence was an insult to the Dominion. "Launch the demonstration fleet," Zorath ordered. 50 vessels. Target the city called New York. Veth hesitated for a moment. "Commander, our scans show unusual activity around that city. The humans appear to be positioning military assets." "Let them," Zorath replied with a cold smile. "Let them see how useless their primitive weapons are against our shields. It will break their spirit." 50 Veltari warships descended toward Earth, their silver hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Each ship was armed with plasma cannons capable of melting steel from 100 miles away. Each ship was protected by energy shields that had stopped every weapon ever fired at them. They moved in perfect formation, a demonstration of unstoppable power. Major Kevin Torres sat in the cockpit of his modified F-45 fighter jet. watching the alien ships approach on his radar. He was 34 years old, a veteran pilot who had flown combat missions in 3 different wars. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. "All pilots, this is command," a voice crackled in his earpiece. "You are carrying prototype weapons. They have never been tested in combat. We do not know if they will work." Torres smiled grimly. "Understood, Command. But if they do not work, I guess we will not be around to complain." His squadron consisted of 24 fighters, each carrying 2 missiles designed by Dr. Greer and his exhausted team. The weapons combined nuclear and plasma technology in ways that should have been impossible. But impossible was no longer a word humanity could afford to use. "Squadron leader to all pilots," Torres said calmly. "Stay in formation until we reach firing range. Do not break off until you have launched both missiles. If you survive the first pass, come around for guns only. Good luck." The Valkyrie ships detected the human fighters when they were still 50 miles away. The alien commanders felt nothing but contempt. They had faced primitive aircraft before on dozens of conquered worlds. The small flying machines had never even scratched their shields. "Ignore them," the lead Valkyrie captain ordered. "Continue toward the target." The first missile struck his ship 3 seconds later. The explosion was visible from space. The Valkyrie shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, could not handle the crude but devastating combination of nuclear fire and superheated plasma. The shield flickered once and failed. The ship came apart in a ball of orange flame. For a moment, no one on either side could believe what had happened. Then chaos erupted. Torres watched 2 more alien ships explode as his squadron's missiles found their targets. The Valkyrie formation broke apart as captains desperately tried to evade the incoming weapons. Some succeeded. Most did not. "Keep firing," Torres shouted into his radio. "Do not let them regroup." On the ground, batteries of modified surface-to-air missiles added to the destruction. Each missile had been built in the last 60 hours by workers who had not slept since the invasion began. They were rough, ugly weapons, put together with whatever materials were available. But they worked. Ship after ship fell from the sky, trailing fire and smoke. The citizens of New York watched from their windows and rooftops as the alien invaders burned. Some cheered. Some wept. Many simply stared in disbelief. When the battle ended, 47 Valkyrie ships had been destroyed. Only 3 managed to retreat back to the main fleet, their hulls damaged and their crews broadcasting panicked distress signals. "They fight," one dying Valkyrie pilot transmitted to his commander. "They actually fight." Fleet Commander Zorath received the news in stunned silence. He stared at the casualty reports, his 4 hearts pounding with an emotion he had not felt in 2 centuries. Fear. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives. They should not have weapons capable of penetrating our shields." Veth pulled up the sensor data from the battle. "Commander, their weapons appear to be a combination of nuclear and plasma technology. Our shields are not designed to handle such crude but powerful attacks. How did they develop this in 72 hours? "I do not know, Commander. But they did." Zorath turned to look at the blue planet hanging in the darkness. For the first time, he saw it not as a prize to be claimed, but as a threat to be eliminated. "They have made their choice," he said slowly. "They have chosen war." On Earth, the victory was celebrated, but not for long. Admiral Brennan gathered her commanders in a secure room beneath the Pentagon and spoke bluntly. "We won a battle," she said. "Not the war. They have 2,000 ships. We destroyed 47. Do the math." General Morrison, a heavyset man with a thick gray mustache, nodded grimly. "We need more weapons. More missiles. More everything. We have the whole world working on it," Dr. Greer replied. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 3 days. Factories on every continent are producing missiles around the clock. But it takes time to build weapons. Time we may not have. Major Torres spoke up from the back of the room. What about their ships? The ones we shot down. Can we learn anything from the wreckage? Greer smiled for the first time in days. Already working on it. We have teams pulling apart every piece of alien technology they can find. Their propulsion systems, their weapons, their communication equipment. Everything. How long until you understand it? Normally? Years. Maybe decades. Greer shrugged. But normal does not exist anymore. We will figure it out as fast as humanly possible. Around the world, a strange transformation was taking place. Governments that had spent decades threatening each other now shared intelligence freely. Scientists from rival nations worked side by side. Soldiers who had once been enemies trained together to fight a common foe. In Moscow, Russian engineers studied captured Valkyrie shield generators alongside their American counterparts. In Beijing, Chinese factories produced missiles using designs shared by European scientists. In Tokyo, Japanese programmers worked with Indian coders to crack alien communication encryption. Humanity was doing something it had never done before in its long and bloody history. It was fighting as one. Fleet Commander Zorath spent 3 days analyzing the disaster. He reviewed sensor data, studied the wreckage of his fallen ships, and questioned the surviving pilots. What he learned terrified him. The humans had developed weapons specifically designed to defeat Valkyrie shields. In 72 hours. A technological leap that should have taken a century, achieved in 3 days by a species that had only recently learned to leave their own planet. They are adaptive, Veth observed quietly. More adaptive than any species we have encountered. They are dangerous, Zorath corrected him. And we must destroy them before they become more dangerous. He began planning his next assault. This time, there would be no demonstration. No warning. No mercy. 1,000 ships would descend on Earth at once, and they would burn the planet clean. But as Zorath made his plans, he could not shake the feeling that he had already made a terrible mistake. He had given the humans 72 hours to prepare. He had shown them his weapons, his tactics, his weaknesses, and they had learned. The Valkyrie Dominion had never faced an enemy that learned so quickly. They had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender. They had never faced an enemy like humanity. The real war was about to begin. Fleet Commander Zorath abandoned all caution. The humans had embarrassed him, destroyed his demonstration fleet, and turned him into a joke among the other commanders. He would not make the same mistake twice. All ships, he ordered. Full planetary assault. Burn everything. 1,000 Valkyrie warships descended on Earth like a storm of metal and fire. They came from every direction, overwhelming the primitive human defenses with sheer numbers. Plasma fire rained down on cities across the globe. Military bases exploded. Communication towers melted. The sky turned orange with destruction. In the first hour, humanity lost 300 million people. The world burned. But it did not break. In bunkers beneath the earth, commanders coordinated their forces. In factories protected by mountains, workers continued building weapons. In hidden bases scattered across every continent, soldiers prepared to fight back. Captain Amy Sullivan commanded the submarine USS Shadow. Hiding in the cold depths of the Atlantic Ocean, she was a quiet woman with steady hands and ice in her veins. When the Valkyrie landing craft appeared above the water, carrying thousands of ground troops toward the American coast, she was ready. Fire all tubes, she ordered calmly. Modified torpedoes shot through the water, rising toward the surface before transforming into missiles. Each one carried the same nuclear plasma warhead that had destroyed the demonstration fleet. The alien landing craft had no time to react. 18 Valkyrie ships fell into the ocean that day, taking their invasion force with them. Sullivan watched the explosions on her sonar display and allowed herself a small smile. "Reload all tubes," she said. "There will be more." On the other side of the world, Colonel Pete Dawson led a guerrilla force through the Rocky Mountains. He was an old soldier, gray-haired and scarred, who had spent his career studying unconventional warfare. Now he put that knowledge to use against an enemy from the stars. The Valkyrie ground troops were tall, insect-like creatures with hard shells and plasma rifles. They were trained for conventional warfare, for battles fought on open ground against organized armies. They were not prepared for what Dawson had planned. His fighters hid in caves and forests, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. They used traps and ambush, explosives, and sniper rifles. They killed aliens one by one, wearing down the invaders with patience and cunning. "They do not understand us," Dawson told his troops one night, gathered around a small fire in a hidden valley. "They think war is about big ships and powerful weapons. They have never faced an enemy who fights like we do." A young soldier named Tony Grant looked up from cleaning his rifle. "How do we fight, sir?" Dawson smiled grimly. "We fight dirty. We fight patient. We fight until every last one of us is dead, and then our ghosts keep fighting. That is the human way of war." The Valkyrie commanders began sending reports back to Fleet Commander Zorth. The reports made no sense. The humans had lost their cities, their infrastructure, their organized military forces. By every measure, they should have surrendered. Instead, they were fighting harder than ever. Resistance groups appeared in every occupied territory. Supply convoys were ambushed. Patrols were attacked. Soldiers disappeared in the night, their bodies found days later with human weapons beside them. The Valkyrie had conquered 37 worlds, and none of them had fought like this. "They should be broken," Beth said, studying the latest casualty reports. "We have destroyed their civilization. Why do they continue to fight?" Zorth had no answer. He had never encountered a species that treated destruction as motivation rather than defeat. But the worst news came from a young human named Ben Crawford. Ben was 23 years old. A programmer from a small town in Ohio, he had spent his teenage years hacking into video game servers and corporate databases, teaching himself skills that his teachers never understood. When the invasion began, he was recruited by military intelligence and given a simple task: crack the Valkyrie. Communication encryption. Experts said it would take years, maybe decades. The alien code was unlike anything humans had ever seen, built on mathematical principles that Earth scientists were only beginning to understand. Ben cracked it in 6 days. "I do not know how to explain it," he told General Morrison during a video call from his basement office. "Their encryption is actually pretty simple once you understand the pattern. I think they never expected anyone to challenge them, so they did not bother making it secure." Suddenly, humanity could hear everything. Every order from Fleet Commander Zorth. Every communication between Valkyrie ships. Every plan, every strategy, every moment of doubt and confusion. Admiral Brennan used this information to devastating effect. She knew where the enemy would strike before they moved. She positioned her remaining forces to maximum advantage, ambushing supply convoys and reinforcement fleets. She turned the Valkyrie's own communications against them. In 6 weeks of fighting, Zorth lost 300 ships and over 50,000 soldiers. His ground forces were scattered and demoralized. His officers were beginning to question his leadership, and the humans showed no sign of surrendering. One night, Zorth stood alone on his command deck, staring at the burning planet below. He had expected a quick victory. Instead, he had found something else entirely, something that kept him awake when he should have been sleeping. That haunted his thoughts when he should have been planning. These humans were not like other species. They did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because fighting was in their nature, written into their genes by millions of years of evolution on a dangerous world. They were predators. Every last one of them died, and Zorath had kicked their nest. A communication arrived from the Valtteri High Council, demanding an explanation for his failure. They wanted to know why a simple conquest had turned into a prolonged war. They wanted to know why Dominion soldiers were dying by the thousands against primitive opponents. Zorath did not know how to answer. How could he explain that these primitives were the most dangerous enemy the Dominion had ever faced? How could he make the Council understand that humanity was not a species to be conquered, but a force of nature to be survived? He sent a reply asking for reinforcements. More ships. More soldiers. More weapons. The Council agreed, but they also sent something else. Observers. High-ranking officials who would watch Zorath's campaign and report back to the Dominion leadership. They wanted to see for themselves what was happening on this strange blue world. They would get their wish, and what they saw would change the galaxy forever. On Earth, Admiral Brennan gathered her surviving commanders for a strategy meeting. The situation was desperate. Humanity had inflicted heavy casualties on the invaders, but their own losses were staggering. Cities lay in ruins. Billions had died. The planet was wounded in ways that would take centuries to heal. But Brennan saw something in her officer's eyes that gave her hope. Not fear, not despair, determination. They think they are winning, she said quietly. They think we are almost broken. Colonel Dawson nodded. Good, let them think that. We have been studying their technology, Dr. Greer added. Their propulsion systems, their weapons, their ships. We are learning fast. Faster than they expect. Brennan leaned forward. How fast? Greer smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. Fast enough. The humans were not just surviving. They were adapting, learning, growing stronger with every battle, every defeat. Every sacrifice that the Valtteri had come to conquer a primitive world. They had found something else entirely, and they were only beginning to understand how badly they had miscalculated. The Valtteri High Council received Fleet Commander Zorath's request for reinforcements with stunned disbelief. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever required additional forces. The Dominion fleet was designed to overwhelm any resistance with its first assault. The idea that a primitive world could fight back was unthinkable. Yet here was Zorath, one of their most experienced commanders, admitting that he was losing. Send the observers, the High Counselor ordered. I want to know exactly what is happening on that planet. Observer Kethis was chosen for the mission. He was an elderly Valtteri, a scholar who had spent his long life studying the psychology of conquered species. He had witnessed dozens of subjugations, documented the collapse of civilizations, and written extensively on the nature of surrender. He arrived in the Sol system 3 months after the invasion began, aboard a diplomatic vessel that kept its distance from the fighting. What he witnessed from that safe position shattered everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans had done something impossible. Dr. Greer stood in the center of a vast underground facility, surrounded by the wreckage of captured Valtteri ships. His team had been working around the clock for months, sleeping in shifts, living on coffee and determination. They had taken apart every piece of alien technology they could find, studied every component, analyzed every system, and they had figured it out. The propulsion system is actually quite elegant, Greer explained to Admiral Bren and her command staff. Once you understand the basic principles, it is not that different from our own theoretical work on spatial manipulation. The Valtteri just had a few thousand years head start. Brennan raised an eyebrow. Are you saying we can build our own? Better than that. Greer smiled, and there was exhausted triumph in his eyes. We already have. In a hidden shipyard beneath the Nevada desert, the first human starship neared completion. It was not pretty. It was a rough combination of human engineering and stolen alien technology, held together by determination and desperation. But it worked. They called it the USS Liberty. Brennan inspected the ship with her senior officers. The hull was scarred and patched, assembled from the wreckage of crashed Valkyrie vessels. The weapon systems were a combination of human nuclear missiles and captured plasma cannons. The propulsion drive was copied directly from alien designs, with human modifications that Greer insisted would make it faster and more efficient. How many can we build? Brennan asked. 12, Greer replied. Maybe 15 if we push our resources to the limit. We are using every piece of salvaged alien technology we can find. 12 ships against the remaining Valkyrie fleet. Brennan shook her head. Those are not good odds. No, Greer agreed. But we have something they do not. What is that? We have been listening to their communications for months. We know their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. He paused. And we know they are terrified of us. Observer Kethis received reports of the human shipbuilding program with growing alarm. He had expected to document a broken species, struggling through its final days before inevitable surrender. Instead, he was watching something unprecedented. The humans had reverse-engineered Valkyrie technology in 3 months. 3 months. A process that had taken the Dominion 2 centuries of careful research, achieved by a species that had been throwing rocks at each other just a few thousand years ago. How is this possible? He transmitted to the High Council. Their scientific advancement is accelerating at an impossible rate. The Council had no answer. Neither did Kethis. But he continued to watch, and what he saw next terrified him even more. Admiral Brennan led the first human counterattack from the bridge of the USS Liberty. Her fleet of 12 ships, crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth, launched from hidden bases around the planet. They moved fast and quiet, using the Valkyrie's own propulsion technology against them. Their target was the enemy staging point near Jupiter, where Zorath had positioned his supply ships and reserve forces. It was supposed to be a safe position, far from the fighting. Protected by hundreds of warships, the humans arrived without warning. Brennan had studied every Valkyrie battle for months, listening to their communications, analyzing their tactics. She knew how they thought, how they reacted, how they made decisions under pressure. And she knew exactly how to exploit their weaknesses. All ships, attack Pattern Delta, she ordered calmly. Target their supply vessels first. Without fuel and ammunition, their warships are useless. The human fleet struck like a thunderbolt. Plasma fire and nuclear missiles tore through the Valkyrie formation before they could organize a defense. Supply ships exploded. Fuel depots erupted in balls of flame. Reserve vessels scattered in confusion. Their commanders screaming contradictory orders into their communication systems. Observer Kethis watched the battle from a safe distance, his 4 hearts racing with terror. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever studied. They were reckless and unpredictable, taking risks that no rational commander would consider. They pressed their attacks even when outnumbered, even when damaged, even when defeat seemed certain, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning. A human pilot named Chris Vega flew a damaged fighter through the chaos of battle. His weapons were empty, his engines failing, his shields gone. Any sensible pilot would have ejected, saved himself. Lived to fight another day. Vega pointed his crippled ship at the Valkyrie command vessel and accelerated to maximum speed. Liberty, this is Vega, he transmitted calmly. Tell my family I love them. The fighter struck the command ship at full velocity. The explosion took out the bridge, killed the commanding officer, and threw the entire Velthury defense into chaos. Observer Kethis stared at his display in disbelief. He sacrificed himself deliberately. He chose death over retreat. "They do not fear death," his assistant whispered. "They use it as a weapon." The battle ended with a human victory. The Velthury staging point was destroyed, their supply lines severed, their reserve forces scattered. Fleet Commander Zorath was forced to retreat his remaining ships to defensive positions, closer to Earth. But the humans did not celebrate for long. They had won a battle, not the war. Zorath still had hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and the Dominion had the resources of 37 conquered worlds to draw upon. More importantly, they had captured something valuable. Fleet Commander Zorath himself. A human special operations team, led by Colonel Dawson, had boarded Zorath's flagship during the chaos of battle. They fought their way through corridors filled with alien soldiers, taking casualties with every step, until they reached the command deck. Zorath faced them with cold dignity. "You will not break me," he said through the translator device. "I will tell you nothing." Dawson smiled grimly. "We do not need to break you. We just need to ask the right questions." The interrogation lasted 3 days. The humans did not torture Zorath. They did not threaten him or his crew. Instead, they simply talked to him, asked questions about the Dominion, showed him images of human history and culture. And slowly, Zorath began to understand what he was facing. He saw records of human wars stretching back thousands of years. He saw weapons of destruction that made Velthury plasma cannons look primitive. He saw a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet somehow always survived. "You are monsters," he whispered finally. "Your entire history is violence and death." "Yes," Dawson agreed quietly. "We are. But we are trying to be something better." "Then why do you fight so hard?" "Because fighting is what we do. It is what we have always done." Dawson paused. "But that does not mean we enjoy it. We fight because we must, not because we want to." Zorath stared at the human colonel for a long moment. In his 4 eyes, something shifted. Not respect, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Now?" Dawson smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. "Now we take the fight to you." In his observation post near Saturn, Observer Kethis transmitted his final report to the High Council. His words would echo through the halls of power across the Dominion, changing the course of galactic history. "These humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They are violent and unpredictable, capable of terrible destruction. But they are also adaptive and creative, able to match our technology in months rather than centuries. They do not surrender because surrender is not in their nature. They will fight until they win or until they are extinct, and I am no longer certain which outcome is more likely." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I recommend immediate negotiation. The alternative may be the destruction of the Dominion itself." The council read his report with growing horror. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, 12 human ships prepared for their next mission. The hunt had begun. The Velthury High Council convened an emergency session in their great hall on the homeworld. For 3,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the expansion of the Dominion, the conquest of 37 worlds, the subjugation of countless species. The walls were lined with trophies from defeated civilizations, monuments to Velthury supremacy. Now those walls seemed to close in around them. "Human ships have been detected entering our system," the High Counselor announced, his voice trembling slightly. "They are not attacking. They are requesting a diplomatic meeting." The council members exchanged worried glances. The humans had traveled across light years of space in ships they had built in months, using technology they had stolen and improved. They had fought the Dominion to a standstill, captured one of its most decorated commanders, and turned the invasion of their world into a galactic embarrassment. And now they wanted to talk. It could be a trap, one council member suggested. A trick to get close to our homeworld. If they wanted to attack us, they would not need tricks, Observer Kethis replied quietly. He had returned from the Sol system, a changed Velthari, haunted by what he had witnessed. They have nuclear weapons modified with our propulsion technology. They can strike anywhere in the galaxy now. If they wanted to destroy us, they already could. The council fell silent, absorbing the implications. What do they want? The High Counselor finally asked. I believe, Kethis said slowly, they want something far more dangerous than war. Admiral Lisa Brennan stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, watching the Velthari homeworld spin slowly beneath her. It was a gray planet, covered in orderly cities and industrial complexes. Efficient and cold, like the empire that had built it. Behind her stood representatives from every nation on Earth. Americans and Russians, Chinese and Europeans, Africans and Asians. For the first time in human history, they spoke with one voice. The Velthari High Council assembled across from them, their four eyes filled with fear and confusion. These were the masters of 37 worlds, the rulers of an empire that had crushed every enemy it ever faced. Now they sat before a species of primitives who had done the impossible. Brennan stepped forward and spoke clearly. You came to enslave us. You burned our cities, killed our people, destroyed our civilization. She paused, letting her words sink in. You found something else. Behind her, holographic displays flickered to life, showing images from human history. The council watched in silence as they witnessed the long story of human violence. Ancient battles fought with bronze weapons. Medieval wars that killed millions. World wars that devastated entire continents. Nuclear arsenals capable of destroying planets. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, weapons that humans had developed to kill each other with ever-increasing efficiency. We are not a peaceful species, Brennan continued. We have spent our entire existence fighting among ourselves. We have developed more ways to kill than any species in this galaxy. We are very, very good at war. The High Counselor shifted uncomfortably. If you have come to threaten us, Admiral, you should know that the Dominion will not submit to intimidation. Brennan smiled slightly. I have not come to threaten you. I have come to offer you something. The council members leaned forward, suspicious but curious. We want peace, Brennan said simply. Real peace. Not conquest. Not domination. Not the destruction of your empire. We want something that has never existed in this galaxy before. She took a deep breath. We want a partnership. The council chamber erupted in confused murmuring. This was not what they had expected. They had prepared for demands, for ultimatums, for threats of annihilation. Not an offer of friendship. You invaded our world, the High Counselor said slowly. You killed billions of our citizens. Why would you want peace with us? Because we are tired of war, Brennan replied. We have been fighting for as long as we can remember. Wars between nations, wars between ideologies, wars between religions. We finally found something that made us stop fighting each other. You. She gestured to the human representatives behind her. For the first time in our history, we are united. Every nation, every culture, every people. You gave us that gift when you attacked us. You showed us what we could achieve when we worked together instead of against each other. Colonel Pete Dawson stepped forward, carrying a small metal case. He set it on the table between the humans and a Velthari, then opened it to reveal a single device, a human nuclear warhead, modified with Velthari hyperspace technology. We figured out how to send these anywhere in the galaxy, he said calmly. We could destroy your homeworld from across the stars. We could wipe out your empire world by world until nothing remained but ashes. The council members stared at the weapon with undisguised terror. But we choose not to. Dawson closed the case. We choose peace instead. The High Counselor struggled to find words. What do you want from us? Brennan outlined the human demands. The liberation of all Dominion slave worlds. The establishment of a galactic council where every species had equal voice. The sharing of technology to ensure no world faced conquest alone. The end of the Velthari Empire, replaced by something better. You conquered 37 worlds, she said. We will help you set them free. Not as an act of war, but as an act of healing. Every species in this galaxy deserves the chance to determine its own future. And if we refuse? Brennan looked at the High Counselor with calm, steady eyes. Then we become what you feared. We use our weapons, our ships, our endless capacity for violence, and we tear your empire apart piece by piece. We do not want that. But we will if we must. The council deliberated for hours. They argued, debated, and analyzed every option. But in the end, there was no real choice. The humans had proven themselves too dangerous to fight, too determined to defeat. The Velthari High Council surrendered within the hour. But it was not surrendered to a conqueror. It was surrendered to an idea. The galaxy changed in the years that followed. The Velthari Dominion became the Galactic Commonwealth, with Earth as its founding member. Slave worlds were freed, their people given the chance to rebuild their civilizations. Technology was shared, not hoarded. Conflicts were resolved through diplomacy, not war. Humanity spread across the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. They built ships and stations, established colonies on distant worlds, and formed friendships with species they had once feared. The violent predators of Earth had become something new, guardians of a fragile peace. But the other species never forgot what they had learned in every council chamber, in every diplomatic meeting, in every quiet moment between allies. The same thought lingered. The humans had chosen peace. They could have chosen otherwise. They possessed weapons capable of destroying civilizations, and they had decided not to use them. That decision, freely made, was more terrifying than any threat. Observer Kethis spent his final years writing his memoirs. They became required reading at Velthari academies, studied by scholars across the galaxy. His final assessment of humanity echoed through the centuries. We searched the galaxy for monsters and found only ourselves, he wrote. Then we came to Earth and met the real thing. They terrified us into becoming better. And somehow, impossibly, they became better too. That is the horror and the hope of humanity. They can become anything. Destroyers of worlds or builders of peace. Monsters or saviors. The choice is always theirs. I have watched them carefully, studied their history, observed their behavior, and I have reached a single conclusion that haunts my dreams. Pray they continue to choose wisely, because if they ever choose otherwise, nothing in this galaxy will survive. Years later, Admiral Lisa Brennan gave her final public address before retirement. She stood before representatives from 100 worlds, humans and Velthari and dozens of other species, all gathered in the Great Hall of the Galactic Commonwealth. We came from a small planet circling an ordinary star, she said quietly. We spent most of our history trying to kill each other. We built weapons that could destroy our world. And we came close to using them more than once. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. Then someone came from the stars and showed us what we could become. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but something better. Something we never thought we could be. Partners, protectors, friends. She smiled, and there was peace in her eyes. We are still learning. We still make mistakes. The violence in our nature never goes away completely. But every day, we choose to be better. Every day, we prove that the monsters can become guardians. That is the human way. That is our gift to the galaxy. And we are just getting started." The assembly hall erupted in applause that echoed across the stars. And somewhere in the darkness, on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow sun, a new generation looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the future. They were human, they were dangerous, and they had chosen hope.